Right, so hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Whitton Hour 2023 Year in Review. This is something I like to do every year, where I go through all the stuff that the channel's done in the past year and the musical releases of the past year, and give you a little roundup, a little kind of composite of all the information that's flown by these past 365 days, although probably more like 380-ish by the time this comes out. Hopefully this will come out before what I deem to be the first major album release of the year, but I'll get on to what that is in a little bit. So I know that this one is a bit more ad hoc than it normally is, but that's just because I'm not really still in a position to film videos full on, so this is probably the best substitute for the moment. So yeah, I'm sorry if that's like a bit shit, but like it's the best I can do at the moment. So in terms of the channel over the year, obviously there's not really a lot to talk about, because I mean the few videos that I did that were more kind of think pieces, because that was one of my initial aspirations for the year, is don't put out too many kind of big pieces, but the ones that you do, make them really good. So the two main ones that I put out were the Delicate Balance of Band and Producer and the Genius of Hardy Fox video. The Band and Producer one was actually supposed to come out at the tail end of 2022, but I just didn't get it out in time. But still, I think that video is definitely one of my more solid think pieces in terms of, you know, the like points of reference that I used, or the points that I made being well backed up. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to make sure was right on with it this year, was whatever point you're making, really make it properly. And that kind of grew and grew over the past few years, where I've been kind of trying to implement that piece of advice more and more and more. And so I think this is really the year where I implemented that to its fullest degree. And obviously the Genius of Hardy Fox video, I mean, that was really a passion project. Like, that took weeks and weeks and weeks of editing, research, voiceover. Like, it's genuine. It's the piece of content that I've poured the most time into. And I know that it's not good to ever say this, because then like pieces of content that you make afterwards will have to like measure up, but I genuinely think that the Hardy Fox video, it's the only example of a video where I can genuinely look back on and go, I enjoy that piece of content, like separate from it being made by me. It's like one of the only pieces of content where months, like years in retrospect, I can go, yeah, that's still really, really good. Like, obviously the Producer's video I still like, but I haven't, not to the degree of the Hardy Fox video, certainly not, just because the amount of time and the amount of passion and the amount of effort behind it, I was just really, really happy with how that came out. And honestly, the fact that those are the only two think pieces that came out during the year, I'm completely happy with that, because otherwise there was a lot of albums that came out this year. Like, so I was basically just on a review kick from day one, basically. Like, it was a bit dry in kind of January, February, as it normally is, granted, but I feel like once we kind of hit March, April, it was basically non-stop. Like, there was so many things to review, and overall this year, this is probably the most albums I've listened to in any year ever that I've been alive. So, there's just so much cool stuff that came out this year, so much different stuff that came out this year, that, the fact that basically all I was doing was reviews was more just out of necessity than anything else. And obviously I kind of took a break in around kind of August, like late July, early August, because, just of some things I had going on at the time. But I feel like I've kind of, it's because I didn't kind of, I mean, there was obviously the logistical side of it that was kind of hampering that, but also I did just kind of miss like listening to an album and not having to make copious notes on it, particularly when an album is like really middle of the road, say, and all you can say is that you're complaining for the exact same reasons on every single song. It does get a bit draining, and so I think having the freedom to still listen to the albums and still apply them critically, because I knew I wanted to do this, but also allow myself to be a bit more casual with it, I certainly relish that opportunity, and I think it allowed me to be, if anything, a bit more objective when it comes to my ranking this year. Because what I'm going to do this year, like I did last year, is to rank order all of the albums and the EPs that came out this year. And so I feel like me taking that more casual approach for the second half of the year actually helped in terms of I wasn't like thinking about, write notes. I was just able to absorb the music in its like purest form. I know this is going to sound really wanky, but I mean, it made a difference to me at the very least. So, you know, I guess me taking a break from content, it was needed, but I think the results, for me personally anyway, have been good. Maybe not for you guys, because obviously you've not got any content, but I mean, for me, I think it helped, I think it even helped my critical brain, you know, in a way. So, you know, there's every cloud has a silver lining, as they say. But before we get on to the actual album EP ranking, there are actually some individual awards that I would like to give out. And so, with that, I would like to kickstart the first Evan Whitton Hour Year-End Awards. Yes, basically, I went through the year and basically, like, divided, got these specific categories for awards, kind of like the Oscars, if you like, or the Grammys more pertinently, because I remember me and my good friend XD Cyndaquil, we actually did this on a Discord call, just like as a casual thing at the end of 2022, and I thought, this is really cool, I want to do this next year. And so I've got these kind of predetermined categories that I'm going to go through now to give you the Evan Whitton Hour Awards. A lot of these obviously will be recurring. Well, all of them will be recurring, nearly all of them. But, you know, I thought it would be good not just to get the best album of the year, which is obviously coming, but obviously there are maybe areas that certain albums really shine in that even the best one of the year maybe, you know, loses out a little bit. You know, who knows? So I thought it was important, and also would just be a bit of fun to do the extra kind of supplementary awards. So the first one that we're going to do is what I'm going to call Best New Artist / Discovery. So this is either any band that has become active in 2023 that I know of, or any band that I had not ever listened to before that I came across in 2023 and really loved, whether they were already active or not. And so the nominees are Jellyskin, who this year came out with their album In Brine; Joy Anonymous, who supported The Streets and came out with their album Cult Classics; Pink Pantheress, who came out with their album Heaven Knows in October or November, I believe it was; Peng Shui, who came out with EP2, I believe in March, a bit of kind of like a rap, grime, new metal, electronic group, they're really cool; RVG, who supported Billy No Mates on tour and recently came out with their new album Brainworms; excuse me if I butcher this pronunciation, Nabia Iqbal, who came out with Dreamer in April; and also Nia Archives, who I discovered via a Lollapalooza, or no, was it Lowlands live stream, who came out with an EP this year as well that I thought was pretty cool. And as for new bands, so those are all the already active artists. As for new bands, we have the full supergroup House of All, who came out with their debut album this year, which I thought was really good, as you know. Left Debris, which is kind of like a Nottingham supergroup made up of John Paul, Rat, Nail, Tolliday and Jesse the Rebel Poet. They came out with their debut album this year. It was great. And also Temps, the James Acaster guerrilla-esque experimental hip-hop project that came out this year, and I also thought that was fantastic. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to give two winners. I'm going to give one winner for already active groups and one winner of the three new artists. So I am proud to announce that the winner in the already active category is gonna have to be, I mean, for me it's got to be Pink Pantheress. Like, bear in mind, I'm doing this not only based on the album that they put out this year, but also kind of retrospectively with their whole discography. So I think of the already active bands that I've got here, obviously I love Peng Shui. Their back catalogue's pretty damn solid. RVG, really good as well. But there's just something about Pink Pantheress' sound, like that mix of kind of retro UK garage breakbeat, but also like dream pop, a little bit of hyper pop maybe as well, just all melded together in a really, really cool way. And so, I think for best discovery of an already active artist, Pink Pantheress has got to be up there. As for the new bands, I would have to say that my winner goes to House of All. Like, obviously, that you could say that that's kind of cheating because The Fall have been active for ages and these guys have all been active musicians for a very, very long time. But I just think their chemistry as a group, even if they are all ex-4 members, there's something about the chemistry between the 5 of those guys particularly that I think just made for a really fantastic album. So my winners in the brand new artist / discovery categories are Pink Pantheress and House of All. Right, and so now the next award is for best production, which is basically which album this year did I think sounded the best sonically. And there are obviously quite a few that I could have picked from, but this is the list that I've got it down to. So we have Gorillaz with Cracker Island, which was produced by Damon Albarn, Greg Kurstin and Remy Kabaka Jr. We have Orbital with Optical Delusion, produced by Paul and Phil Hartnell. The brand new Pill album, End of World, which was produced and engineered by James Towler, Brendan Davis, Danny Thomas and George Perks. We have the brand new Metallica album, 72 Seasons, produced by Greg Fiddleman. The brand new Enter Shikari album, A Kiss for the Whole World, produced by Rao Reynolds, George Perks, Dan Lancaster and Clint Murphy. We have the brand new House of All album, again, engineered, produced by Thomas Williams. We have the brand new Willie J. Healy album, Bunny, produced by Lauren Humphrey. And we have, again, Pink Pantheress' Heaven Knows, produced by Pink Pantheress, Greg Kurstin, Mura Massa, Phil, Oscar Scheller, Cash Cobain, Count Baldor, Benny X, Press Play, Wonder, London on the Track, Vitals, Danielle Harley, Sam Galatry, Filthy and Risk all have producer credits on the album, and I think all of these albums sonically sound fantastic, like really crisp, really clean, really punchy, but also, if it necessitates it, kind of dirty as well. Basically all you need to know is that these albums absolutely, it feels like the engineering and the sound is really built well for the albums in question. So I would have to say that the winner for me for the best produced album of 2023 is going to have to be the new Pill album for me. It's going to have to be. Like, James Towler is just an absolute fucking beast, and like his production on the last 2 Pill albums have been fantastic, and so it's absolutely no surprise that it's also fantastic on there. So I think Pill really have to take this one, and shout out to Brendan and Danny and George as well, the engineers on it, and obviously all the Pill guys have their hands in the production as well. So yeah, really hats off. The next award is for best lyrics, so whichever album this year I thought had the best written lyrics, most kind of impactful lyrics, if you like, anything like that, just whichever lyrics I thought were best written for these albums in question, not necessarily taking in the vocal performance, but just the lyrics on their own merit. And the nominees are UK Grim by Sleaford Mods, Cacti by Billy No Mates, Stereo Mind Game by Daughter, House of All by House of All, Heaven Knows by Pink Pantheress, Scaring the Hose by JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown, But Here We Are by the Foo Fighters, and The Brighter the Shadow, The Brighter the Light by The Streets. And I'm gonna have to say that my winner for best lyrics, I'm gonna have to say Scaring the Hose. Like, there are just so much interesting wordplay and one-liners and the double entendres and all the cultural references, and it's all so ridiculous and mad and insane, but fantastic, and really just shows 2 absolute tour de forces of hip-hop coming together in the best way. So it's gonna have to go to JPEG and Danny, I think, on this one. And moving into a related territory, we have the award for best vocals. So pretty self-explanatory again. Whichever album had the best vocal performance of the year is the one that I will give the award to, basically. So the nominees are Cacti, again by Billy No Mates. Again, Stereo Mind Game by Daughter. Night Drive with their EP Position 2. John Lydon on End of World, again by Public Image Limited. Willie J. Healy on Bunny. And Pink Pantheress on Heaven Knows. And for me, the winner is going to have to be... I'm going to throw a curveball in here, and I'm going to say Daughter. The vocals on that album from, I believe her name's Eleanor, if I remember correctly. I should have looked this up beforehand. They're just fantastic. I think her vocals are just absolutely fantastic. Like airy, heavenly, melodic, emotional, just absolutely fantastic. And they fit the album absolutely to a T. Eleanor Tonra, that's what she's called. So well done, Eleanor. You are, in my opinion, the best vocalist of 2023 on a recorded album anyway. And so for the final non-best album award, we have Best Musicians. So this one for me is whoever on an album displayed the best musicianship. So, you know, whoever was the best technical player, whoever was the best kind of, you know, this one is definitely more of a technical award than any of the other ones, but it's like, there were some moments this year where the musicianship of an album really, really blew me away, and so I would like to pay credence to some of that. The nominees are the Baby Metal Band from their album The Other One. I'm going to say Baby Metal Band because there are that many different musicians involved that I'm just going to kind of collate them all into one, because some of the riffs and stuff and the grooves on that album are just fucking monstrous. Wes Borland for his album Mutiny on the Star Barge, which for being entirely self-produced is incredibly impressive. The way he gets some of those cinematic textures and stuff like that and makes it sound as huge as it did. While I wasn't a massive fan of the album as a whole, the musicianship behind it really has to be commended. There is the core trio of James Acaster, Seb Rochford and John Dietrich from Temps on their album Partygate to Purgatory, because I think not only is the drumming absolutely phenomenal throughout, but all of the musicianship. Granted, they did have some musical guests, but I think the core trio of musicians on that album is really where your bass line is, and so if that's not good, the whole thing goes tits up. It just so happens that these guys were really on their game for this one, so I really have to give a shout out. And the next one is the man himself, Steve Hanley from House of All, bassist extraordinaire, obviously, and gave The Fall their sound for the better part of 20 years. So, you know, it was obvious that the Steve Hanley-ness of the bass playing really came through on that album. And finally, we have Lou Edmonds from Pill, whose guitar playing, saz playing, mandolin playing, banjo playing is just so integral to Pill's modern sound and just gives it that Pill sound, that world music influence, that psychedelic influence. It's really, really cool, and some of the stuff that he does on the new album, particularly fucking Northwest Passage, like Jesus Christ, it is incredible. But I think for the best musician or musicianship of 2023, I'm gonna have to go for Seb Rochford, James Acaster and John Dietrich of Temps, because they just absolutely smashed it out of the park for me. So yeah, it was some stiff competition, but for me, the best musicians were John Dietrich, Seb Rochford and James Acaster. And so I suppose that is it for the preliminary awards. I realised I actually forgot an award, so we're going to do it now. It is just simply for Best Song. Before we move on to Best Album and Best EP, we're going to do Best Song. So this is not entirely representative of my Best Album of the Year ranking or anything like that. Just individual songs off of albums, which did I think were the strongest. And the nominees are Requiem for the Pre-Apocalypse by Orbital, Comments by Iggy Pop, Swim Back by Daughter, No Fooling Me by Don Letts featuring Holly Cook, Common Ground from RVG, Tiger Woods by Willie J. Healy, Digital Flower by Night Drive, and Capable of Love by Pink Pantheress. And I'm gonna have to go for my winner for Best Song of the Year it's going to have to be, I think, Swim Back by Daughter. Like, it's so enveloping, so psychedelic, incredible. The string arrangements are just absolutely second to none. The production sounds fantastic. It's just everything that I was worried the Daughter album might have been, because I've had trouble with their stuff in the past just being atmosphere, like trying to mask a lack of songwriting. Absolutely all of that was completely dispelled when I heard this, and I'll be honest, I was absolutely fucking blown away when I heard this. So for me, it just, Swim Back was the only choice really for me. And so now we get to the most painstaking part of this, where I give you my overall ranking of every single album and EP that I have heard this year. I mean, this is gonna take a while, but I'm nothing if not thorough. And in total, there were 49 EPs and albums that I had the pleasure and indeed the displeasure of listening to this year. And so now I'm going to rank them all from worst to best, giving you a little kind of summation of why I came to the conclusion I did. So let's start off at number 49 with Glenn Matlock and Consequences Coming. Glenn Matlock, famously the ex-bassist and songwriter for the Sex Pistols, comes out with a brand new solo album and unleashes onto the world some of the worst and most corniest dad rock I've heard in my entire life, which handily makes for one of the worst listening experiences I think I've ever had in my entire life. And given that his last album had a song called Sexy Beast on it, I don't really know what I was expecting. At number 48, we have the new metal band Head PE and Detox. They are back with a brand new album, and I'll say this right, some of the riffs, some of the grooves, decent. But I think what Limp Bizkit kind of seized upon in 2021 that these guys haven't, is that trying to do fully unironic, deep, edgy, but trying to be meaningful new metal and market it for 2023 is fucking whack, for lack of a better word. And I swear to God, if I hear that stock garage band trap drum sound one more time, I'm going to kick a hole through my window. Number 47 is maybe a surprisingly low placement, but it's Soft Machine with Other Doors. Legendary British jazz fusion band are back. And this one was kind of weird, because sure, there were some moments that I enjoyed, some nice technical playing, decent drumming, alluring melodies, but the one thing that I look for from jazz bands, me personally, that fire, that momentum, just isn't there, and a lot of the tracks don't even necessarily have a direction, so it's either just kind of flat, or when it's not flat, it just kind of pointlessly noodles for ages, and so ended up being really disappointing. At number 46, we have Post Malone with Austin. This is his brand new album, his most kind of, if you like, singer-songwritery album to date. 0 features, just 17 tracks of pure Post Malone. And while sure, some of the melodies again, and some of the songs at their core, I suppose, are decent, the amount of fucking reverb and distortion and the production on this album is absolutely abhorrent, and it sounds awful, and it makes songs that would otherwise be decent sound bad, and songs that are just awful sound even worse, because not only are Post Malone's vocals manipulated to an inch of their life, but given that there are no features, all you get are his lyrics, and some of them are very, very questionable, so it's not really, I'm not surprised this ended up here. At number 45, we have Jar Wobble with A Brief History of Now. Public Image Limited, founding member, in collaboration with Susie and the Banshees' John Klein, come together to supposedly reconnect with Jar Wobble's post-punk roots. And it's not very good, honestly. Like, again, some of the bass playing, some of the grooves, some of the riffs even, fine, decent, but like there's just so much that is just unnecessary and annoying about this album. Jar is not a very good singer. Joe is fine, but not great either. A lot of the melodies, actually coming to think of it, are quite incessant and annoying. The drums quite often don't have the punch that I want them to. The instrumental tracks are just completely unneeded, and some of it is just straight up corny. So yeah, it's a real mixed bag, this one. At number 44, we have Madness with Theatre of the Absurd presents C'est La Vie, the legendary ska pop group released their first album in 7 years, and I'll say this, for all the kind of pomp and circumstance around this album, basically what you do, when you strip this album down, you have a fairly by-the-numbers Madness album, and while Madness in their lyrics have discussed like serious topics before, they really take a full hard stab at it on this album, and so, you know, the very blunt imagery and the messaging in some of the tracks makes it so much less enjoyable. Also the fact that the tracks just don't seem to be imbued with that same sense of fun as on other Madness releases, even just the one before this. So, like, is it the worst thing in the world? No, but would I ever go out of my way to listen to it again or recommend it to anybody? Particularly when compared to other Madness albums? Not really. And again, the amount of pomp and circumstance around this album and all the conceptuality and the interlude and stuff basically add to nothing. At number 43 we have K Tempest with the Nice Idea EP, which I know seems weirdly low, but it's only a 4-track EP, 2 tracks on which I wasn't really that big of a fan of, and while K is always on like fairly decent form lyrically and vocally, and Dan Carey for the most part is a very competent producer, just with how slapdash and how rushed this felt. I mean, maybe because it was a Record Store Day release, but even still, just everything from the sound of this album to the way that it's put out to the way that it's structured, this just feels like the least consequential release in K's entire discography by quite some margin. At number 42, it's Blur with the Ballad of Darren. The Britpop legends finally reformed, and they released an album that basically just feels like they're playing musical dress-up with the Arctic Monkeys' most recent 2 albums, and for the most part it's not very good. Again, some competent melodies, decent grooves, a few interesting lyrics here or there, but nothing that, in my opinion, even comes close to recapturing Blur's former glories. Maybe Barbaric, but it's really just like a very loungy, very laid back, very middle of the road album, and some of the more melodic tracks just feel kind of off-putting with the way they're written, so like, it's not awful, but I wasn't a big fan of it either. At number 41, it's Wes Borland with Mutiny on the Star Barge. Limp Bizkit guitarist goes and does a film score. At least conceptually that's what this is supposed to be, and maybe it's my difficulty reviewing film music that kind of plays into this a little bit, but while some of the musical ideas on this album are really cool, really big, really cinematic, really eerie, their like incessant repetition over 5-6 minute run times can tend to drive me insane sometimes, and to be fair, even some of the ideas from the get-go just do not gel with me, so it's a shame this one landed as low as it did really, but I suppose it can't be helped. And at number 40 we have Corey Taylor with CMF2. The Stone Sour and Slipknot frontman comes out with his second solo album, basically trying to prove to everybody, hey, I can do metal, but I can also do country and rock and balladry and all of this kind of stuff. Watch me try and do it. And while this is definitely a marked improvement over his first solo album, because that was awful, a lot of the results just tend to be either kind of tacky and a bit corny, or just kind of generic. Like, granted, the bits where Corey goes heavier on this album are actually pretty cool, but those are very few and far between, and so it just mostly ends up being pretty nondescript, honestly. Moving into the 30s, number 39, it's Brick Smith with Valley of the Dolls. Ex-Fall guitarist and also Marquis Smith's ex-wife comes out with her first fully fledged solo album. Really, you know, given Brix's pedigree over the years, obviously with her first solo album, you're expecting big things, and while you do certainly get flashes of her obvious ability from time to time on this album, mostly what you get is just a fairly decent, very run-of-the-mill kind of sun-soaked garage rock album, which, like, it's decent, but given who's behind it, you would have expected so much more. At number 38, it's The Damned with Darkadelic, the punk and goth rock band. This album, I believe, came out in April, and yeah, while I think that the lead vocalist definitely has a very solid showing throughout, and some of those kind of gothic rock, punk fusions that they go for at points on this album are genuinely quite cool, but there's also just like a few tracks, maybe just because of the age that the Damned are at, where just either the ideas don't land, or the songwriting isn't there, or it's just, for lack of a better phrase, corny as fuck. There are quite a couple of those, so, you know, it's very hit and miss. The moments that hit really do hit. Like, I do have to give them credit, and like I say, the vocalist has a very solid showing throughout, but I think just based on the blueprint they were operating from, you're bound to get a few duds. Number 37 is Rancid with Tomorrow Never Comes. Yes, I find LA hardcore kind of exhilarating in very small doses, you know, that very punchy, aggressive, but also very kind of sing-alongable brand of punk that they've made their name off of for the past 20 years. In small doses, sure, I can handle it. Stretched over 16 tracks, no thank you. It makes 30 minutes feel like 50, because believe me, it gets incredibly one-dimensional very quickly, even if throughout the album there are a few bright spots. Next up, number 36, it's the Murder Capital with GG's Recovery, Irish post-punk band, release Irish post-punk album, and there's not really a lot more that you can say about it. Like, there's a few decently cool ideas, particularly on the front end, in my opinion, but I feel like there's not really a lot beside those few moments that really set them apart from any other post-punk band I've heard. Like, some nice bass lines, sure, and the drumming is competent and what have you, but like, aside from those very few fleeting instances, again, mostly on the front end where you go, hey, this is kind of cool, it's also just like post-punk album does post-punk album. Next up, number 35, it's Pigs with Land of Sleeper. These guys offer up a kind of hard rock stoner doom fusion on this brand new album, and some of it is genuinely crushing, genuinely kind of like, you know, foreboding and kind of creepy and doomy, and when it gets it right, it is really, really fucking cool. But also, kind of similarly with Rancid, when you're shooting for that sound over and over and over for basically the whole album, and some of your song lengths are quite long, it does get to be a bit taxing occasionally. At number 34, it's Miller with Miller Mixtape. Miller, one of the, or MILA I should say, 1/3 of the Ratboy Lowlife project, comes out with his own debut kind of mini album. It's 7 tracks, just like, I think it's even under 20 minutes possibly, and you know what I'd say is that if you enjoy Lowlife and you enjoy Ratboy, you probably would have enjoyed this more than me. But for me, Miller, like, the beats are there, sure, some of the hooks are kind of there, I guess, like, it's you know, it's pleasant to listen to while it's on, but he just does not have the charisma or the songwriting ability or the kind of, you know, mic command that makes Ratboy so intriguing. So if you're into this style of music, sure, go for it, but I'd much rather just listen to Ratboy or Lowlife, to be honest. Number 33 is Pendulum with their Anima EP. Pendulum come back with their second EP in 3 years, I think it is now, and for sure the singles to this were great. Colour Fast was a fantastic drum and bass kind of anthemic style track, just as Halo featuring Bullet for My Valentine was also pretty good, but the Scarlord collaboration on this thing is such a head scratcher, and Silent Spinner is, I don't even know what the hell they were going for with that, so it's just a real mixed bag. But throughout it, even if the collaborations and the songwriting are a bit misjudged, you do still get just the quality of musicianship that you expect from a Pendulum EP, which is maybe why I put it higher than something like K-Tempest or West Borland, but it's still a bit of a mixed bag. Next up at number 32, maybe the surprisingly lowest ranking on the whole list, I have Chemical Brothers with For That Beautiful Feeling. Now, sure, there are definitely a few very decent tracks on this, and just by default that makes it better than 95% of the albums from like retro rave acts that have come out of the past like 3-4 years. That said though, it does still feel like they suffer from the same ailment that a lot of those albums do, where basically a lot of the formula for the lesser tracks on the album is that you take a decent beat or a groove and just put a load of really noisy, ear-piercing synths over the top of it, or just like nonsensical samples, and call it a day. And the weak moments on this album really exemplify that. And to be honest, like, I understand people saying that the good track, like the singles to this were good, but as for the album being named like Best Album of the Year, I really just don't get the hype around this. Some high points, sure, but like, not that many. And then at number 31, it's Don Letts with Out of Sync. Legendary UK punk scene musician, filmmaker, comes out with his brand new album, and all things considered, this could have just been a very decent reggae pop album, and for the most part that's what it is. Nothing too objectionable, a few actual decently bright spots here or there, particularly the couple of collaborations with Holly Cook I would like to point out. But also, aside from those, and aside from a lot of it just being fairly run-of-the-mill kind of pop reggae, the few experiments that it goes for, basically all of them don't pan out in any meaningful way whatsoever, and so it takes what could have been a decent pop reggae album and just kind of pulls it down a little bit, which is a shame. And then at number 30, it's Metallica with 72 Seasons. Obviously, Lars, James, Rob and Kirk are back, and on this album, sure, they have some really decent tracks, some nice menacing riffs, some absolutely punishing grooves, amazing solos, some of James Hetfield's best vocal performances and lyrics that he's put down in quite a while, I would say as well, but stretched over nearly 80 minutes. My god, it gets mind-numbing, and this is coming from someone who loves Lulu, and this album is 10 minutes shorter than that, but my god, it's like a marathon trying to listen to this thing, because as much as good as some of the ideas might be in isolation, like the one-dimensionality of it really does start to shine through at minute 65, if you see what I'm saying. At number 29, it's Near Archives with Sunrise Bang Your Head Against the Wall. Near Archives, a modern drum and bass jungle artist that I came across on the Lowlands live stream earlier on this year, and while, over a live stream in a festival setting, her tracks do bump pretty hard, when you put them in the context of an EP where you listen to 6 of them back to back to back, like, sure, there's some nice vocals throughout the whole thing, because Nia is a very competent vocalist. A lot of the grooves are very danceable, very cool, some nice laid back guitar samples here or there, but it just feels pretty mild, honestly. Like, there's nothing really that is jumping out at me as being like wow on this EP. Like, it's good and it's decent, I suppose, but like not really much on it that warrants repeat listens, especially. Number 28 is Blank Banshee with 4D, the, I believe, Canadian vapor trap producer, comes back with a brand new album, a few more kind of industrial aesthetics here or there, some kind of, sci-fi themes running through some of the beats here, but I just like, as much as some of the beats on this are cool, because they do have that very kind of futuristic, artificial, kind of, postmodern thing going on with them that I really like, a bit of a Tron influence maybe as well, so, there's definitely some cool ideas on this album, but because of just how Blank Banshee's music functions, a lot of it, as cool as it might be, just tends to kind of go in one ear and come out the other, and by the end of it, a lot of the tracks were like barely indistinguishable, but still I would recommend giving it a listen just because the sounds that he's working with are pretty decent. At number 27, it's Blue Orchids with Magpie Heights. Martin Brahma makes his first appearance on this list with his post-fall post-punk band, and this one sees them incorporating elements of retro rock into the post-punk repertoire, whether it be, some of the Beatles-y melodies coming through, or there's definitely kind of a Doors influence here with some of the grooves and stuff, or even a bit of Elvis here or there as well. And granted, some of that is cool, and it definitely works to kind of craft this sort of gothic, stately vibe that the album has going on, but I just feel like it could have done with a bit more of a fire up its arse, a bit more momentum, a bit more spark, a bit more something, And I'll tell you this, the sound of a Hammond organ, particularly towards the end of the album, will start to grate on your brain. At number 26, we have Iggy Pop with Every Loser, the first album of the year. Iggy Pop comes back with Andrew Watt in tow as producer, and despite my reservations about him kind of selling himself down the river as just like the rock guy with no t-shirt, you do certainly get some highlights where Andrew and company definitely channel kind of Iggy's 70 rock and Stooges heyday, but there's also a few times where either it feels like Iggy is kind of deliberately parodying himself or just like ripping himself off, or just that some of the attempts at a more modern sound don't really go over very well. But there are some absolute serious highlights on this thing, like Comments by, that's an absolutely phenomenal track. The Regency as well is really good. Like, there's definitely a fair few high points, but also some moments where I just sit there going, why did you do this? And at number 25, it's Baby Metal with the other one, the Kawaii Metal trio, come back with arguably their most mature album to date, where the novelty of their stuff is definitely, it's a lot less reliant on the novelty than I think previous albums have been, and so is much more enjoyable as an album experience for me. But some of the tackiness of the sounds definitely still remains, just because of the kind of sonics that they're working with. And my god, this thing is absolutely overproduced to fuck. Like, yeah, the riffs and the drums are pretty fucking killer throughout most of this, but my god, it hurts your ears. And number 24, it's a surprise late entry from Joy Anonymous with Cult Classics. Like a fairly standard but good standard, I suppose, of kind of modern EDM dance music, those chipmunk vocal samples, sped up kind of eerie melodies or airy melodies, some nice punchy house beats. It ticks all the boxes for a good modern house album, and sure, any of these tracks in isolation are sure to go down pretty well at your next house party, but just when you have them presented to you back to back to back, you do start to realise how tacky some of the sounds they're working with are. And at number 23, it's Nabia Iqbal with Dreamer. The dream pop artist lives up to that title, because this album, my god, it is super psychedelic at some moments, super enveloping, really pretty, really heavenly sounding, but also at some points backed up with some pretty nice dance beats as well. Like, not only are the melodies fantastic at a lot of points on this album, but also the beats are pretty decent too. Granted, there are a few moments where the songwriting is very much let down by the sound of the album, with it just being absolutely caked to fucking reverb. But when that doesn't happen, some of this is some of the best pop music that I heard this year, definitely. It's just when the sound or the idea usurps the songwriting is when I start to have a bit of an issue. And at number 22, it's Stewie J. Blenkhorn with Everything Is Alright. Again, there's not really anything on this album that I would say is world-altering, mind-bending, paradigm-defining or anything like that. But what it is, it's just a really, really solid indie rock singer-songwriter album. Like, really nice melodies, decent laid-back grooves, solid vocals, maybe a few tackier elements in the production here or there, but it's overall just a very solid singer-songwriter album. And at number 21, it's Gorillaz with Cracker Island. Gorillaz release probably their least conceptual album in a while, since Humans, I think. Maybe the last album they released that was like this was The Fall in 2011. And I always get worried when they do these kind of lower scale albums more recently, because they tend to be the worst. But I'd say this is probably the best of them. Like, the collaborators they bring on are really good for the most part. The production is colourful, vocals are solid. It's just that a few of the tracks, maybe given the collaborators or the sound that they were going for in general, where they just seem a bit malformed or just don't really land, or I'm just generally confused as to why they're even on a Gorillaz project in the first place, but for the most part a very, very solid offering, and easily their most solid, like, just normal album, I would say, since Demon Days, maybe. And at number 20, it's Foo Fighters with But Here We Are. Dave Grohl and company, the original post-grunge band, come back after a very, very turbulent year or couple of years where not only they lost their drummer Taylor Hawkins, but also Dave Grohl's mother, but they channel that into an incredibly emotional and incredibly raw and stark and brutal, but also very uplifting and very melodic and pretty damn cool post-grunge album. Like, these guys were the originators of what I might call modern radio rock, and what they prove on this album, despite a few reservations with a few bits of songwriting maybe not being as up to scratch, because either they're just trying to sound like Foo Fighters mostly, or maybe some of the more low-key cuts are just a bit too stark for my tastes. But what they prove is they do this sound better than anybody else, with the emotional touch just giving it that extra added punch. At number 19, it's Daughter with Stereo Mind Game, the indie folk trio, after a 7-year studio album hiatus, come back and basically deliver what I think is the best album of their career, because there are so many bands in this lane where the atmosphere is a mask for the lack of songwriting, but what they prove on this album is that the songwriting is most definitely there, and oh yeah, the atmosphere, we've got that too, so you absolutely get the best of both worlds on this album. Eleanor Tonra is on top form vocally, the music is incredibly enveloping, emotional, psychedelic, fantastic. It's maybe just a shame because the high moments on this album are so high, where the moments that aren't quite up to scratch just become all the more obvious, and there are only a few of them, but you know, it does become more noticeable. But again, that's only because the high points on this album are some of the highest that I heard all year. And at number 18, it's Enter Shikari with A Kiss for the Whole World. They set out on this album to make an album of bangers, and I think for the most part they did that. And I'd say this as well, if it wasn't for the pointless interstitial moments and a lot of the album's lyrics sounding cheesy as hell coming straight from a self-help guru course, this album would probably be a lot higher up. But they're just like, their inability to just make a straightforward album in a way really hinders this one, on top of the lyrics at some points being like pretty corny. But that said, I would say this is easily their strongest offering since the Minesweep, so if you're a fan of them, you'll definitely like this. And then at number 17, we have Left Debris with Thick Cuts, Nail, John Paul, Rat, and this time joined by Jesse the Rebel Poet, 4 musicians of the Nottingham scene and I believe Bristol as well, come together to deliver the grimiest and dirtiest and most DIY hip-hop album arguably of the year. It's got that trademark rap production of it, that mix of kind of soul, hip-hop, punk, rock, everything's in the mix here, and it's all sounding pretty damn good. And while granted a lot of the messaging in the lyrics is very, very on the nose and very, very blunt to the point where it can get a bit distracting, I do feel like for a kind of more collaborative approach to this sound, like they did pretty damn good. Like, so there's some really cool music on here, and despite what I said about the lyrics, there are also a fair few moments where the lyrical intensity and the conviction on this album is really, really admirable. So, you know, for a first album from a new group, it's really, really not that bad, and I think takes the appeal of John Paul and Rat's music before this. Maybe it's not quite as good as their own individual releases, but it definitely highlights those same appeals. At number 16, it's Night Drive with Position 2, the synthwave trio come back with a sequel to their initial EP, Position 1, and it sounds fantastic. They take a sound and a lane that has become so oversaturated and so overdone and so cliche, and prove why they are brilliant at it, plain and simple. Like, it's futuristic, it's emotional, it's danceable, it's punchy, it's poppy, it's everything you would want. Maybe a few moments don't hit as hard, sure, but this is easily the best synthwave stuff for my money that you will find in 2023. Hands down. And at number 15, perhaps another surprisingly low placement, we have JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown with Scaring the Hose. Without a doubt, this album, when it is strong, it is fucking strong. It's two titans of modern experimental hip-hop coming together and just delivering some of their best stuff, like incredibly witty lyrics, absolutely unhinged, full of character vocal performances, great, well-rounded, mad, insane, but also really grimy and punchy and epic production. It's just like a few of the experiments they go for are maybe even a bit too far off the deep end, even for me, which says quite a lot. And so, you know, those few moments where I think they go maybe a bit too far are the ones that are maybe a bit less successful. But for the vast majority of the time, this is, it's one of the strongest hip-hop albums of the year for my money, and I can absolutely understand why it's a lot higher on some other people's rankings. And at number 14, it's Temps with Partygate Purgatory and the supplementary After Party EP. Comedian James Acaster teams up with jazz drummer Seb Rochford and multi-instrumentalist John Dietrich, as well as over 30 other additional musical and vocal contributors to deliver not only one of the most colourful, vibrant and fun and off-the-wall albums of the year, but also one that is absolutely categorically fucking insane. This thing is not easy listening, and again it kind of suffers from that thing with that Scaring the Hose did, where some of the ideas it's going for are maybe a bit too far even for me. And also, given the very kind of free-form way that the album was put together, where they didn't really care too much about verses or choruses, etc., it can feel a bit self-indulgent at times, and definitely some of the ideas could have done with condensing. But my god, is this thing so much fun, and it really is testament to everybody involved, because I feel like everybody really tried to bring their best here, and for the most part, it shows. Number 13 is Aphex Twin with Black Box Life Recorder 21F/Inner Room 7 F760. Legendary IDM EDM producer is back with a new EP. Granted, again, it's very short because it's only 3 main tracks and a remix. But I think on this EP, basically, Richard just comes back and goes, hey, you know why I'm great? This. And basically just proceeds to show you all the reasons why he's great. And so you get a very decent EP at the end of it. Like, sure, would I have liked some more material? Yes. And is the remix on the end pretty unnecessary? Yes. But I think the 3 core tracks here just, again, show why people really love Aphex Twin, and makes a much better case for him existing in 2023 than a lot of kind of throwback dance acts have done before him, so credit there. At number 12, another surprise late entry is Jelly Skin with In Brine. The only way I can describe this album is if the Marquis Smith Mouse on Mars collaboration Von Sudenfend did a fusion dance with the Oriels, and my god, it is fucking gnarly and as awesome as it sounds. Like, super, like, gritty, grimy, but super punchy and really danceable industrial beats. Some really cool break beats on this as well, but also supplemented by some really, really nice melodies and vocals throughout as well. So, I mean, if you're into kind of abstract, industrial, kind of electronic music, please give this a go, because my god, it really surprised me. And at number 11, it's Orbital with Optical Delusion. The Hartnell brothers are back with their brand new album, with a host of collaborators as well, from Sleaford Mods to Anna B. Savage to the Medieval Babes to Penelope Isles. They basically do what the Chemical Brothers tried to do and failed to do, which is a retro dance act, giving us a from front to back really, really, really good album. Like, sure, there are a few moments here that I really was not a fan of, particularly on the latter end, but that's only like 2, maybe 3 at a push tracks out of 10, and the other 7 tracks that are there not only are good, not only are great, but are pretty fucking fantastic. So, you know, I think the collaborators are well placed. I think the music is fantastic, the production sounds great. It's definitely the best example of a retro rave act coming out with an album that I can remember, at least in recent years. So hats off to you guys. And we now get into the top 10, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, at number 10 we have Tour with Tour Tape. Billy No Mates, aka Tour Maries, comes out with what is by all accounts much more laid back release, mostly consisting of some tracks that she dropped sporadically over Bandcamp, which she basically said that this pseudonym or this moniker was a way to put out stuff with less expectation, less kind of stress of like the big album release on her back. And while that definitely shows on the album, with it being maybe a bit more rough around the edges than her Billy No Mates stuff, you still get the incredible songwriting, you still get the quirky bed-spun but still slightly spiky production, you get the fantastic vocals and the heartfelt lyrics, you get all of that, just in a slightly more kind of bedroom laid-back lens this time around, which for me certainly isn't a bad thing. And at number 9 it's Pink Pantheress with Heaven Knows, the best pop album I think arguably of the year, and I'll say arguably because I'll get onto that in a minute or a couple of minutes, but I didn't think it was possible for an artist to sound like their music is both 25 years old and comes from 100 years in the future at the exact same time, but Pink Pantheress does that for me. Like, the great fusions of like UK garage and jungle and house music are still there, but also with that modern hyperpop edge. Her vocals are incredibly emotive, incredibly full of character. The lyrics are also very deeply emotional as well. And I think the few big name features also do lend a fair bit of credibility to this album as well. Not that it needs it, because it is just absolutely fantastic, but still. And then at number 8 we have The Streets with The Brighter the Shadow, The Brighter the Light. Or I should say The Darker the Shadow, The Brighter the Light, which I think is handily the best thing The Streets have done since Computers and Blues. Like, there's obviously a more modern street sound that has been forged since Mike came back in 2017, but absolutely none of it even holds a candle to this. Like, I was really worried, because a lot of the stuff that Mike's put out recently has felt very kind of low budget and grimy and kind of low effort, and some of the production has just felt like modern for modern's sake. But this one, he really brings that street sound back full force, but with a modern twist on it. So some great beats, really nice sample usage, like really cool witty one-liners. Obviously his offbeat delivery is not for everybody, but for me it absolutely works 1,000,000%. And so would I say that this is worth a 12-year wait? Maybe that might be pushing it, but it is absolutely the best thing he's done since Computers and Blues, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think is worthy of being a Streets comeback album, which for comeback albums in general is exceedingly rare. At number 7 it's RVG with Brainworms. I caught these guys when they were actually supporting Billy No Mates on tour, and I thought that their mix of kind of shoegazy, indie, but also some punk in there as well, and some kind of gothic post-punk, post-rock, all that stuff comes together into, again, it's a lane, like I said, with Daughter, where a lot of people can use atmosphere to mask songwriting, but these guys, if anything, do the opposite. They use the atmosphere to try and quell down the intense emotion that is coming through this album. Like, it is absolutely fucking intense, because not only are the instrumental performances fantastic, really nice grooves, great riffs, all of that, but also the vocals and the lyrics are some of the most emotional and some of the most tortured, but also some of the most relatable and some of the most charismatic that I've heard this year. So it was a really solid effort, and I'll say this as well, they are probably the best support band I think I've ever, like, in terms of quality of material, these guys deserve to have their own headline tour sooner rather than later, please. And then at number 6, it's Peng Shui with EP2, which, as much as I said about Head PE, knowing that, fully unironic new metal is kind of whack, I feel like these guys put their own twist on it, and for me, for whatever reason, it just works. Like that mix of like early 2000s really dirty underground kind of boy in the corner style grime music mixed with like early 2000s deep dark dubstep mixed with like new metalcore plunging like jump the fuck up riffs, all of that, just like the most gnarly, dark, gritty, noisy combination of ingredients possible, and this thing just sounds like a punch in the balls. And I get that its overbearing edginess and its machismo might not be for everybody, but sometimes a musical kick in the nads is exactly what you need, because this thing is maybe the only album this year where my face muscles have involuntarily scrunched up at its intensity, so that should tell you something. And getting into the top 5 now, it is House of All with their self-titled album. Martin Brahma, as the lead musician, brings together essentially the fucking Fall equivalent of the Avengers or the Justice League here, including obviously Steve Hanley, but also his brother Paul on drums, Cy Woolsencroft and Pete Greenway all come together to deliver an album that, yes, obviously has that Fall influence on there, but also carves something that's incredibly unique and all of its own, packaged with some absolutely fantastic grooves, incredible riffs, and just a feeling of great chemistry of all of these guys that are on this record. Like, obviously, getting 5 people in a room and expecting them to bang out the best album of all time is obviously a very difficult thing to do, but these guys, the fact that these guys, having only worked with each other in very limited capacities in the past, have come together with something this good, but also given their past something that stands on its own so well, is really a testament to their ability, because this is probably the most muscular rock album of the year. And so if you're not so much into metal but you do like your rock, this is the album for you, let me tell you. At number 4, it's Willie J. Healy with Bunny. Willie J. Healy takes his typically kind of 70s inspired sunny rock stuff, rock balladry. There's definitely a big Beatles influence in the stuff that he does, but this time he chose to combine it with some Motown and funk aesthetics, and the results are absolutely incredible. Just so infectious, so danceable, so catchy, so well written, so well produced, amazing grooves, great vocal performance, really nice feel-good lyrics, but in a way where they don't feel corny. I'll say this is easily the best example of happy music that we've got all year. Like, you put this album on and you just feel happy, and that's all that really needs to be said. At number 3, it is Public Image Limited with End of World. John Lydon and the gang, after an 8-year studio hiatus, come back with their 3rd album of the modern iteration, if you like. And while this one is probably the least immediately gratifying of the 3, if you sit with this one, my god, the rewards are just like indescribable. Like, there's definitely a lot more musical range on this album. I think they draw a lot more from the music of John's youth, and all kinds of different various sounds and styles going on this album, but in a way that only Pill could do. And obviously John's vocals and his lyrics are just absolutely on point. Lou Edmonds is a fantastic bassist. Bruce and Scott, just the rhythm section on this is fucking impeccable throughout, and James Towler's production is just incredible. So yeah, maybe the least accessible of the 3 Modern Pill albums so far, but I'm telling you, sit with it and you will be rewarded. Also, side note, rest in peace Nora, and rest in peace Rambo. And at number 2, just missing out on the top spot, we have Sleaford Mods with UK Grim and its companion EP, More UK Grim. Sleaford Mods, obviously legendary Nottingham post-punk duo, are back with a brand new album, and granted, they do ditch some of the glitchier, more synthetic aesthetics of their previous album and swap that for maybe something a bit rawer, a bit organic, at least in places anyway. But in my head, they've taken one step backwards to take 5 steps forwards, because again, like with the Pill album, I suppose, there's so much ground covered on this album. There's like, kind of rocky cuts, more danceable cuts, more atmospheric cuts even, some like boom bappy hip hop Wu-Tang sounding stuff here or there, and also you do get a few electronic experiments on here that go over really, really well. It just shows that throughout Sleaford Mods' lifetime, Andrew Fearn's production has leveled up, his production kind of range and his scale has leveled up, Jason's lyrics have matured a lot, and also his vocal range and vocal ability is also vastly improved. So yeah, this is just a fantastic album from the guys. Maybe not my favourite in their entire discography, but I would say that if you're a fan of Sleaford Mods, you really couldn't have expected any more, because this is just absolutely great. And so that can only mean that the number one album for me of the year is Billy No Mates with Cacti. Billy No Mates, I'd said that Pink Pantheress was arguably the best pop album of the year, because this one is arguably a pop album as well. Like, it takes every element that has been brilliant about Tour's music over the last couple of years and just gives it to the absolute nth degree. Like, the beats are punchier, are poppier, are more danceable, are catchier. Everything is the songwriting is absolutely incredible. Tour's vocals are on absolute top form. The lyrics are absolutely heartbreaking, but also incredibly descriptive and incredibly vivid as well. I said in my review of her live show that her live show proved that she was one of the most compelling performers in modern music today. Well, if this album proves anything, is that she is one of the most compelling songwriters of the modern era, and that is all I really need to say. And for me, the fact that this album from January 13th was able to maintain the top spot despite all the amazing music that came out this year is really just testament to how fucking brilliant it is, because it's so emotionally potent and, production wise just so colourful, so varied. It's just the ultimate. If you took everything that could have been great about a Billy No Mates album and said, right, I would want it on an album, I promise you all of it is here in full force. So for me, it was the obvious top pick. And so now, I suppose as a final note, what do we have to look forward to in 2024? Well, in terms of releases, there's only a few that have been lined up so far that I know of, but there's already quite a few lined up already, actually, looking at it. So we've got the brand new Black Grape album, Orange Head, coming out on the 19th of January, I believe. We've got the brand new Imperial Wax album, Tranquilizer, the brand new album from Masterpiece, who supported the Streets on tour. Really looking forward to that. Brand new Elbow album in the middle of March as well. Fantastic. The second House of All album, Continuum, is coming out in early April, so I'm definitely going to be looking out for that, given their very high placement on this list. The Ice-T new metal band Body Count have their album Merciless coming out, which, despite me kind of slating Head PE earlier, I do like new metal as a genre. It is kind of like my guilty pleasure genre, but still, I do enjoy a lot of the stuff that's put out in that vein, so for sure I'm looking forward to it, because I've not really heard Body Count, in any kind of full-length capacity before, just because they've never really been a band that I've looked into particularly. But, by all means, I'm happy to start now. And there's also various unnamed projects to come from various other bands, including the upcoming solo project from System of a Down bassist Shavo Odarjian, which is promising to be super fucking heavy, super punishing, allegedly, so I'm absolutely buzzing to get into that. The album from the kind of indie dance rock supergroup Mantra of the Cosmos, Shaun Ryder, Bez, Zach Starkey, Andy Bell, all coming together. The couple of singles that I've heard from that have been a bit of a mixed bag, but I am definitely excited to hear what the album has in store. Allegedly there was going to be another Happy Mondays album at some point, but I'm not sure whether that will come to fruition now, given that apparently they're going on a bit of a hiatus after their tour this year, but you never know, it might happen. There's also a new Lemonheads album coming out, which I will be, mostly for my dad, keeping a keen eye on, because who knows, they might deliver something great. They haven't done a full-length studio album since 2006, so, you know, better late than never, I suppose. And there's also Tierra Whack, the Philadelphia rapper, who is coming out with hopefully a full-length album of full-length songs, which I think will be the first time that she's ever put out like a full-length, proper full-length project. So I'm absolutely buzzing to get into that, because I think that as far as like modern pop rappers go, if you like, she is absolutely top of the pile. And also there's a new Underworld album set for release later on this year, and I'm going to say this, if the singles as well as the tracks they've been tinkering about with live are anything to go by, oh my god, we are in for something truly special, people. And of course, I know it's a meme because I say it every year, but The Prodigy have essentially confirmed that there will be a new album this year. Like, obviously, I've said that every year for like the past 3 years, but I think it's true this time, because it's not just like tenuous hashtags like, oh, 2022, we're coming for you, you know, that kind of stuff. It's outright Liam saying there will be a new album in 2024, and given how good Disruptive Flow was, even if it was 2 minutes in like the festival circuit in May and June, I am absolutely fucking buzzing. It's the longest I've waited for a new Prodigy album, because I got into them around 2011, but you know, I feel like it's going to be very difficult, obviously, to follow Notorious up, given that it was the last album with Keith on it, or if Keith is on this album in any capacity, I'm not sure, but obviously it's going to be a very difficult job, but I'm sure they can do it, and I'm sure it'll be fantastic, although of course I don't want to put the cart before the horse too much. Oh, Yard Act! I completely forgot about the new Yard Act album. That's meant to be coming out as well. Really looking forward to that. And I also forgot to mention that the Residents have apparently got a brand new album coming out called Dr. Dark at some point in the summer, so that should be good. Apparently it's a bit of a meld between punk and classical, so, I mean, knowing them, it can only, like, be absolutely insane, but it's definitely one to look forward to for sure. So there's already plenty to look forward to in the new year, and indeed plenty more to come. In terms of content from me, will you see any? Well, yes you will. There is a new episode of the Not So Forensic Record Society coming out with a very special guest. I'm going to say, given my work ethic, when I put those videos out, maybe look out for that, maybe towards the end of February, or maybe even the beginning of March, but I'm going to say mid to late February is probably when I'll put that out. So you can definitely look forward to that. In terms of other content, I don't really know, because as I say, like, I enjoyed doing this, and you know, I made notes on the albums in question specifically because I knew I was going to do this and going to enjoy doing it, which I have done. But you know, I think I'm just happy being more laid back about it. Like, obviously, I'll check in at some point, probably. Maybe I'll do this twice a year, make it a mid-year thing, maybe quarterly even. So I would definitely like to, still make some stuff, but when it'll come, what form it'll be in, I really don't know. I like sharing music with people and my passion for music with people, so if I can do that in some capacity, I definitely will, but I just don't know how yet, really. So anyway, I hope in any capacity that you have also enjoyed this video, and obviously plenty of great music to look forward to in 2024, but if there are any other ones that I've missed that you're looking forward to in 2024, please let me know, and I suppose until I see you next, that's all from me. See you later.